Well, welcome everyone to 180 U-Turn, the talk show that features some of the greatest conversion stories of our time. Stories of men and women who are on the highway to hell when they had encountered a Damascus Road experience that completely turned their lives around. Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, and today we're broadcasting from Alongside Ministries, one of the premier prison transition facilities for former felons. For more information on their prison ministry, their weekly meetings and special events, just hop out to their website at asmaz.com. And don't forget, if you want to write me today, please feel free to use our email address on the show. That's steve@180uturn.com. That's steve@180YOUTURN.com, and I'll be happy as best I can to get back to you on it and some of the things. And I just want to encourage everybody. I love the Bible verses you guys send me every time. They seem so timely. So it's really great. Well, today on 180, I want to put a spotlight on the conversion story of Anthony.
Shalkowitz.
Shalkowitz. There, I like that. It's such a good East Coast name, right?
Yes.
It
Polish.
is. Well, Anthony, welcome to the show. And I just want to, and I've read your story. And I've heard from a lot of your people here at Alongside Ministries and some people that know you. You have a blockbuster testimony, in my view. I'm sorry that it had to go this way for you. I never see prison as a good thing. I never see us being into dope at the level that we're into. Right. But God knows what we need, and sometimes we have to go through things, and I'm sorry that we had to do it. But I wanted to talk to you because, you're an Arizona guy. You were brought up basically in Tucson. Yep. And talk a little bit about your early upbringing and your family.
So I was born in Tucson, Arizona, 1975, and lived there for about a year, maybe 2 years, and then as a child we moved to Flagstaff, Arizona. Mm-hmm. So the reason why my dad, he was a plumber in Tucson, and he got hired at NAU. So we moved up to Flagstaff. He started working at the university, and then he got diagnosed with cancer.
Now, when he was up there, he got diagnosed. How old were you when that happened?
I was probably 3 or 4. So he was given a life expectancy of 2 years.
Can you remember did you understand what was going on at the time, or not really?
Absolutely not. I didn't really have an idea because from my memory, mm-hmm. I always remember my dad as a sickly individual. So mm-hmm. we're talking after chemo, after mm-hmm. radiation and everything. So my relationship with my dad was really non-existent. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't any let's go fishing or let's go mm-hmm. throw the baseball around. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like that. Mm-hmm. So the image and the relationship I had with my father was just a sickly mm-hmm. man that was dying.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry that happened to you. I truly am. I understand that. And cancer is a terrible thing. And especially back then, we have way better drugs and treatment and approach to it now. The methodologies are way better. I'm really surprised when I read your story. You were talking about on your dad's side that a lot of these guys were into some serious dope. I'm trying to think about your dad being at that time of the era and stuff going around, mm-hmm. and being white on top of it, right? Being from a European background, right. and doing heroin. Now talk about that, because I'm sorry, that stunned me a little bit.
So my father grew up in Brooklyn, and my dad grew up in a time where, there was he was a hood. Mm-hmm. He was per se a hood. And he got involved in it. He was selling heroin, and matter of fact, my mom told me probably 15 years ago that Halloween night, I think in 1970 or 71, he got busted with the biggest amount of heroin in Long Island. Mm-hmm. So that's who my dad was. Mm-hmm. Then of course, that was the reason why they left mm-hmm. New York to go to Tucson to get sober. So,
okay, no, it's not just your dad.
Yeah, I think my mom was just along for the ride, per se, but
the men in his family too, right?
Well, my grandfather. So my grandfather and my great aunt came mm-hmm. from Poland, so mm-hmm. they were very, very tough people, and my grandfather was very, very abusive. Mm-hmm. My father ran away from home at like age 13, mm-hmm. and by the time my dad was a teenager, him and my grandfather were just going at it. My mm-hmm. grandfather was a very rough guy. Mm-hmm. So he was a bricklayer. Mm-hmm. So he did the UN building in '64 in New York City. So he had hands of gold. Just had a drinking problem. Mm-hmm. And of course, from the alcohol, he became violent. So
I think this is strange because, and I got saved back in the early 70s, okay? And I can understand the introduction to dope in my area. I grew up in Chicago. That introduction in the 60s, I get all that. But now we're into the second generation, your generation now, the second generation of dope. You know, we've had alcoholism for a long time in this country and in European history and all that. But now we have our second wave of heroin addicts or meth addicts. And this is the new thing because now we're bequeathing or we're giving an inheritance of dope to our kids in the next generation. And I'm just fearful that your kids, my grandchildren, are going to be the same situation. We're going to be handing that down. But you know, in this episode, I want to introduce a subject matter because, yes, we're going to talk about heroin addiction. We're going to talk about prison and the things that happened to Anthony. But bottom line, there are things that are happening all over in the United States generally. I brought many stories of this since 2010 about the things that are going on with these gals that we've met in prison and jail and molestation and young age groups attacked by their own family member, male family members, people being sold into prostitution to pay for mom and dad's heroin addiction.
Absolutely.
But in your early life, you know, because your dad's sick, he's not really a hands-on father because of his disease and trying to work and keep the family afloat. You had an experience of sexual abuse towards yourself by somebody else.
Right.
Talk about that. And we've cleared this already with Anthony. We're not talking about stories out of school.
So basically, when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, NAU retired him because it was cheaper for them to retire him than to pay for the cancer treatment. So in that duration of time, I was sexually abused, and I would say either 4 or 5 years old.
Can any 4 or 5 years old understand what's going on?
Well, I mean, I'll put it in the perspective of self. I mean, I never had anyone talk to me and say, hey, if anyone touches you, you do this or that. I felt inside that it was wrong. I didn't know how to express it.
I think this is I just want to go down this road for a second. Listen, there's intrinsic things built in us.
Right.
Of virtue and that is really valid, right?
Right.
And our conscience somehow, even at that age, is just, wait a minute. This is somewhat wrong here. This isn't right, and this is a man on top of it, which complicates matters later on in life, which I totally get. Now, did this last long?
It happened a couple times.
Okay.
It wasn't something that continued, but it did enough damage to where, you know, we'll talk later on about some other things that have happened, but that was the precursor of me starting to be a complete introvert. To me, I was content being by myself, but I was also very lonely, and at a young age I felt like I wasn't good enough, and I had self-esteem issues, and you know, that was, I think, the beginning of before I even picked up drugs and alcohol, and that was at a very, very young age. That's kind of the way I was. I was kind of on the outskirts of things. So,
and on purpose, kind of an isolation, self-preservation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to say, and we're going to be talking about this all these 5 episodes. You know, this is the unsung terror of childhood molestation. Usually, I'm talking about gals, but now we're talking about guys, and it's brutal. The shame, the hassle, the things that you think about, that you go through, and when you talk about setting yourself up for insecurity, I mean, you know,
Absolutely.
This is serious psychological damage. And I just want to, again, if you say, Steve, I'm relating to this story or anything else, and especially if you're local, if you're in the Phoenix area and so forth, we'll make it easy for you to get in contact with Anthony and people who really care and really will help you. And I just thank you for your volunteerism in that regard. Now, to make the finances work, your mom was working at a place, and she wanted to stay on to keep the actual insurance online for your dad.
So what happened was, she was working at a paper factory, and they had a sister company in Oklahoma, and they basically told my mom, listen, the insurance policy that that you have right now for your family won't cover the treatment, but if you are willing to move to the sister location, then I can see if you can get that insurance to cover. So of course that was a great option. She went with it, and next thing you know, we're packing a U-Haul, moving to a place called Pryor, Oklahoma.
Well, first of all, to me, that's a huge, that this guy would suggest this and bail your family out because of this.
Absolutely.
The bills are just, I'm sure, shocking, right? The expense loads. So to me, that was a huge issue, and your mom and dad willing to pack up and leave. I mean, that's a major offering from that guy, and I'm sure you appreciate that when you look back at it now.
Sure.
Now, you talk about having some kind of contact with the Lord during this time. When you're going to church with a friend, he's invited you.
So what happened was, on our street in Oklahoma, the town we were living in, Pryor, is about 10,000 people. So they have one elementary school, one high school, one junior high. And it just so happens that my neighbor directly next door was my age. So we became friends, obviously. We were in the same classes. And the rule was, so they were Southern Baptists, and the rule was if you spend the night on Friday or Saturday, you got to go to church on Sunday. So him and I became, he became my best friend. So of course that was the thing. So I would spend the night, and then on Sunday we'd go to church. So at a young age, I was hearing about Jesus. I started learning about the Lord.
Nothing at home on this, right?
No. So basically, that was my out, and I'm just so thankful that my neighbors invited me to church, because I wound up giving my life to the Lord, and confessing Christ as my Savior. But Jesus talks about seeds on the wayside, and the reason why I mention that is because there wasn't any. I wasn't discipled. I'm a young, I'm a little kid. So no one was telling me, okay, this is how you follow Jesus. So basically, when I didn't go to church with my neighbors, then we weren't talking about Jesus at home. So.
Well, when all this went down, in Oklahoma, you had at least an introduction. You said, it was kind of like seed, and Anthony's referring to the Bible verse that talks about the seed that fell on hard ground. It didn't have any root, didn't have any good fertile. And I just want to say this in case somebody's watching this. It always happens. If you say, Steve, I kind of made a commitment when I was a young person, and it didn't stick. And now you're saying, hey, listen, since it didn't stick, it didn't work. And so I'm not going to give the Lord a second chance. I gave him a shot, and for some reason it didn't go. But I just want to encourage you. You should come together with fertile, to have what happened to you at that time and put it into fertile ground, especially if you're here in Phoenix area. This is a place, Alongside Ministries, one of our sponsors for this whole week that we're with Anthony. These are people that have been through hell and back, been through the meat grinder of life and the gauntlet of drugs. People know what they're talking about, and some people, like Anthony, have had experiences with the Lord before. And yes, it didn't stick, but it didn't have the fertile ground and the good environment. That's right. the real problem here. So, but then you guys went to New York, right? After that?
No. So from Oklahoma, what wound up happening was, my mom and dad. My dad went to go visit my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle, and my great grandma, and he went there, and he never came home. So. My mom and dad got a divorce, and basically my grandma was the one that was the caretaker for my father. So they get a divorce, and now I'm like, okay, I didn't have much of a dad because of him being sick, but now dad is gone. So now it's my mom raising my sister and myself. So yeah, it was challenging. When you're young, you get confused. You don't know why things are the way they are. You just you just got to deal with them the best that you can.
And I just want to say again, just to point out, a lot of us went through bad childhood experiences, myself included. And you just can't expect children to have one domino go and another domino go and another one. These things are chain reaction events in life that just complicate teenage years, adolescent years. It makes everything compounded 10 times. Bad enough to go to teenager when you're healthy, with all the peer pressure and everything. But they have all these things complicating in life. And then finally, you guys move back to Mesa.
Right. So what basically happened was, I'll be 46. So my parents, of course, were quite a bit older, old school. You know, you don't air your laundry in the street. You know, if there's an issue, you sweep it underneath the rug. That was kind of the mentality. So once my parents divorced, my mom got remarried, and we moved back to Arizona. So it went from Oklahoma to Mesa, Arizona.
Now, in that regard, this is kind of like where all the things that we're going to talk about for the rest of the week are all pretty much here.
Right.
Okay. Well, listen, I want to get back to our story with Anthony, and remember, we're going to be doing it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You'll want to watch everything in succession. If you say, hey, I missed a day, don't worry about it. You can hop out to the website and hit any of these shows. Try to watch them in succession. I think your enjoyment will be way better. For more information on Alongside Ministries, all the things they're doing in prison, including their transition facilities, their weekly meetings, their special events, just hop out to their site at asmaz.com. That's asmaz.com, and check it out. If you want to meet Anthony, especially if you're local and some of the brothers that he hangs with, totally want you to do that. Make contact. We're there for you.
Absolutely.
They'll give you the email at the end of the shows Friday, and we'll talk to you about all that. So until next time, I'm Steve Savant, and remember, no one's outside the reach of God. No, not one.